He's an internationally known artist with his own distinctive style. He is a highly acclaimed writer and poet, and he's been an influential teacher too. We decided to meet Gulam Mohammad Sheikh in Baroda to get a glimpse of his art and life around his art. Mr. Sheikh, tell us a little bit about what made you get into painting in the first place.
I don't know when I began painting, but it was from childhood. That in Surendranagar, the small town in Kathiawar where I grew up, I sort of tried my hand at watercolor. We had a drawing teacher in school, and but the best thing that happened to me was arrival of a very senior Gujarati artist who is known as a Kala Guru called Ravi Shankar Raval to this place where I was studying in the school, but I used to go to the library. So he would come to library, which was again my haunt because I used to go to library, and librarian's son was my buddy in the school and all that. I was introduced to him and he said, "Oh, you do painting, I'm glad. So let us do something for the library." And we both then painted what he called Chaya Chitra. That means in shadow-like figures of the history of world. So Ravi Shankar Raval got interested in me and said that, "Look, you must go and study further." And now I didn't know where to go and how to go. I had never been out. So he said, "Go to Baroda."
Anybody in the family guided you?
Elder brother used to do some kind of a painting at the back of glass. You know, the glass painting as it is called. But he had given up, and they all my elder brothers, they all studied, they got jobs, and I was lucky to be the youngest. And my father said, "Well, you do what you want to do." So when Ravi Shankar Raval himself said that, he was very impressed. He said, "Well, we'll give you some money and now you have to fend for yourself, but we'll send you to Baroda." And that is how I reached Baroda, Faculty of Fine Arts.
Okay, and subsequently you went to London to study further.
London I went because I applied for Commonwealth Scholarship and I got a grant to study there for 3 years.
What is it that was your biggest takeaway from your stint first in Baroda and then in London?
The biggest gain in Baroda in those days was the exposure to world art. To know what was happening in the world and that what the business of art is. And that's something, which could be a lifetime vocation. Because our teachers were like that and they didn't expect any money. In those days there was no market.
Yes.
And you see, these teachers were in front of us, they were great figures, they all painted. Bendre used to paint every day. And he would even paint in the college itself, and we used to go look at, what he was doing every day. So that was a kind of a, boost to all the young people who came. And people came from different parts of India. That was another interesting thing. And so there was that kind of a climate that built up. So I made up my mind that, well, this is something which I want to do. So I got a scholarship to go to Royal College of Art in London for what they call ARCA, that Associate of Royal College of Art. So
you must have applied for it.
I applied for the scholarship.
But there must have been a reason why you were applying. Was there any particular motive for you to go and study in London, or you just wanted a broader horizon to open up?
There were scholarships, French scholarship or other scholarships, Italian scholarship, but England was favored destination because of the language.
Right.
Because you speak English, and there, in that country, you can communicate in English. That's one reason. The second reason was that I had heard a lot about it. Because there are many museums in England which I was attracted to, and there are the collections of art, which I wanted to see. And then you can make it a base, and then travel elsewhere. So what my purpose was, actually not to study, to be very frank, because I had already studied here for 6 years in India, and then for 3 years I had taught. So I was sufficiently, in that sense, sufficiently adult in art. So I thought that what should I do? Huh?
So what was the reason then? If it was
So I
not to
said that
study?
I'll go abroad so that I am exposed to world art. I can see world art at a close quarter.
Right.
I can go and see what I have seen in reproduction. You see what is in the book is a small illustration like that. As Malraux would say that, it is museum without walls, but it's a museum, but it's a tiny museum. Here you can go to actual works of art and look at them, face them. So what was available is that, during the holidays, in the vacation, you had 3 months. And in those days, all students just went out.
Backpacked and went.
And it was not backpack, it was
No?
hitchhiking.
Okay.
And we hitchhiked. I hitchhiked all over Italy. And all my favorite paintings I went and saw personally. And it was wonderful experience to be able to travel in the car that somebody owned, and he gives you, or he or she gives you a lift. And then you have to talk to them, and you get to know about them, you get to know about the country. But then they are also very interested in you. So you even learn the language. Sometimes they speak Italian and you have to learn to speak partially in Italian, if not fully. But then they were very excited. They would even sometime, once a priest came with a kind of a broken sort of little car, and when I said that I want to go and see this painting of the pregnant Madonna, which is an unusual painting. So he said, you want to see Madonna del Parto? I said, yes, I want to see Madonna del Parto by Piero della Francesca. He was so impressed. He said, I will take you right to the place.
Oh.
Such things do happen,
Yeah.
So it was wonderful, and I was able to travel, and it was only there in England. You see, Royal College of Art is situated in South Kensington. South Kensington is a place where a great museum called Victoria and Albert Museum is also situated. Now it so happened that it was a neighboring building. So we had a free pass to go to Victoria and Albert Museum. In fact, we used to go and have lunch there, in their canteen. Now on the way to the canteen, I found that there was this fantastic collection of Indian painting. And this was collected by many great collectors, but also great writer called W.G. Archer was involved in that, and he was still there, he was part of that thing. I began to look at Indian art very, very carefully there. It began there. And there finally, when in the 3rd year, my teacher said that, well, you have to write something, before you finish your ARCA. So I said, I will do something on Indian miniature painting. Would it be okay? They said, yes, fine, go ahead and find your guide. So I went to the Victoria and Albert Museum and found Robert Skelton, one of the great scholars of Indian art. And Robert said, yes, I shall be happy to guide you. And I wrote my little dissertation on Kota painting there.
Okay.
So it was a learning experience in many ways, not in classroom, but in the museums, all the great places, all the monuments and all that I visited. So for me, this was a wonderful time that I had in England.
So then you, after how long did you get back?
3 years.
Okay, after 3 years you got back to India?
Well, when I was coming back, I wrote to my teachers in Baroda. I wanted to have some opening because how would I live?
Yes.
I needed something for my bread and butter. Because painting was not a object or something, a profession from which you can get enough money to live. So they said, yes, there is a job in art history again. So, okay. So there I returned to art history.
Yeah. So you returned to art history, and in the early 60s you had your exhibition, your solo exhibition.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that first experience of exhibiting?
Well, basically, you see, let me tell you that working here in Baroda meant that you are totally immersed in your art or whatever painting that you do. And I remember me and my colleagues, all of us worked almost for hours together, and we had our studios open. Best thing about Baroda Faculty of Fine Arts is that studios are kept open after class hours. So you can work at night.
Yes.
And I think the best thing happened there, it doesn't happen in the classroom, no?
Yes.
This is where you begin to dream big.
Yes.
And I painted and painted madly. So I wanted to exhibit, and then I had something like hundreds of paintings with me, I had done in oil, I had done it in watercolor, etc. So in 60 I thought that I must show my work. So in those days it was Jahangir Art Gallery, which was the prime place for all artists to show. So I booked Jahangir Art Gallery, and
So this is something that you did on your own initiative?
On my own initiative.
I see.
And in fact, Hussain, I mentioned that he had once come to Faculty of Fine Art to give a demonstration. He painted a picture in front of us. And so I had met Hussain, I had written to him, and once I went to meet him in Bombay. They were all working in Bhulabhai Memorial Institute. So I asked Hussain, would you open my exhibition? And he very readily agreed. So he opened my exhibition by reading a poem. And that is how my first exhibition in Jahangir Art Gallery took place.
And did you sell a lot?
I think sold 2 paintings, 250 rupees or something like that.
Okay.
And it was a royal sum in those days, that even what would appear like a pittance now. And I think Air India bought those paintings, those 2 paintings. In those days, Air India was a major supporter of arts, and they used to buy paintings and they would display on their various offices. But the best thing was that I met a lot of people. I met a lot of artists. I met Mr. Alkazi, who used to have a kind of a
great collector also.
Bhulabhai Memorial Institute. He used to give lectures on history of art, in those days. He invited me to his theatre workshop, and so they were, this was a very, very, an experience, which was in a way memorable, because, the first exhibition, you go to Bombay, the big city, and there the senior artists like Hussain coming and opening your show and introducing to all the other artists, that was a wonderful experience.
So it was a great beginning.
Good, wonderful. Yes, I was very happy with it.
You've been greatly influenced by Kabir. That's what one reads about you. How does that relate to your work or your writing and your painting?
Well, it's a long story, but to cut the long story short, it comes at a rather late stage in my life. It was not that I was not exposed to Kabir. We have Kabir in our textbooks.
Right.
I have done Hindi, in my school, and I used to read Hindi, and so I knew Kabir and dohas of Kabir. People quote them, even in conversation, as you know that. But it was later in the 80s when a situation that arose and one was confronted with a kind of an issue, what we call communalism. And it was in that context that I thought that I must find some image, some figure, which I would then use it. And Kabir was a figure. And very interestingly, Kabir is very rarely painted in Indian art. We don't have an image of Mirabai at all, and we don't have image of Kabir. We don't know the authentic image, but there is a image which is known to be, that he has a kind of a peacock feather and he has that hair and all that. When I began to read, I found that Kabir was most relevant to our time. In many ways, his writing, his words, and also his image in that sense, because you see, Tera Sai Tujh mein jaag sake to jaag. Jo til mahi tel hai, jo chakmak mein aag, Tera Sai Tujh mein jaag sake. That means he wants you to discover the self. Now this is something which we have been, right from the time we were young students in fine arts, our teachers used to say that you must discover yourself, and in that sense, all this came to us. And I thought that if you could paint Kabir, well, if Kumar Gandharva can sing Kabir, why can't I paint Kabir? That is how it all began, and I did a series of paintings on Kabir.
You've also written substantially. I know these are 2 creative pursuits. How do you match them? Supposing you are in the midst of painting, and then you also, because the mind is always active. So there might be a time when you want to write something, and is there a conflict?
No,
of
there is
interest?
no conflict there. There are two different callings. Poetry calls you in a different way. And there are things which you can write, and there are things which you can paint. There are certain things which you can both write and paint. But between that, like for instance, whether you can paint Kabir's Doha or not, which I thought perhaps you can, find ways. You don't have to go and think of what was there in his time. You can think of your own time and find images, which may perhaps illustrate that. So you could do that. Well, we have tradition of Ragmala painting where music is painted. So we have many models in front of us. So there is nothing very, I don't think there is a dichotomy, or they are not, these two things streams are not antagonistic to each other. They blend in each other depending upon how you deal with them.
Your wife is also a painter, and apart from that, in your family, are there other painters, or are there other creatively inclined people?
Well, they are all creatively inclined in their own subject. My daughter is a historian, and so she writes on her. She actually focuses on Gujarat, and her work is on, she has published her thesis, which is brought out by OUP. And our son Kabir is a public health person. So he has specialized in public health. He has gone to London to study public health, and now he is teaching in National Institute of Public Health in Delhi. So in their own way they are creative. They all write. Both of them write.
Okay.
But they write on the subjects of their own choice.
As an artist, obviously your style keeps evolving over the years. But if somebody were to ask, what is Gulam Mohammad Sheikh's distinctive style, how would you say it is? What would you say it is?
I don't think that's for me to say.
No, we would like it from your perspective.
I don't know. Because how can you sum up a life which is almost 55 to 60 years? I have painted.
Yeah.
I have done some prints. I have made drawings. I have made large murals. I have made books. I have made, what we call covered. That means the boxes, which I have painted. I have made a covered the size of a room, you could walk into. And now I am making sculpture. Where am I to?
How is it
it's a zigzag line, it's never a single straight line,
Yeah.
And wherever it comes, life brings you all kinds of surprises, and you.
But have you ever sort of disciplined yourself and said, no, I must work in this particular direction?
No.
No.
That is something which I have learned from both our tradition as well as from the practices that I am drawn towards. I see that you can do number of things. And it's not one particular mode of work that should define your whatever being or character. It is what you are doing with those media, what you are doing with them, where you are heading, whether it is inventive enough or not, whether what you do, has something where you have found some new way of looking at the world. And that is what I think is essential to it. So no matter how many different ways, and in fact I am combining different ways. I am interested in borrowing from, let's say, traditional Indian art. I am also interested in Italian painting of the 14th and 15th century. I am also interested in contemporary art. I am as much drawn to Balthus and to Bachmann and all that. I am interested in contemporary work that my colleagues are doing. My great friend Bhupen Khakkar, we all shared a great deal. My wife, who is a painter, we share a great many things. And we in some way give and take. And so out of which what emerges, either you call it a painting, you call it a cover, you call it a book, you call it you decide whether it is right or wrong.
If you are having a creative block, you're trying to express in a certain way, you're through the painting, and then you're still searching in your head how to go about it, and then you feel that no, this is not working. So how do you tide over? Say, you know, a writer faces a writer's block. So that's what I meant.
You see, every work is a struggle, whether it is a painting or a poem. I write 5 times, sometimes 10 times. I let it be for a few months and then reread it and then again work on it. Similarly, in a painting, I rub off what I had done sometimes totally. I keep something, I rework on it. So it is a continuous struggle, you know, it goes on and on. And in that sense, every painting leads to another. So that no painting is complete in that sense. There is a sense of continuity. Every painting leads you to another. And I think it is in that sense you tide over all kinds of blocks that come in your way.
Last question, what are the projects that you're working on now?
Well, presently the work that I am doing is for the Kochi Muziris Biennale. And I want to do something which I have not done before. I want to do a public sculpture. So I have chosen a painting of Jaipur school and I am using those images and making large life-size sculptures from them.
Mr. Sheikh, thank you for taking time out for us and wish you all the best.
Thank you.
So you've been taking classes here for how many years now? Since 1960?
Painting department I joined in 1980. So I taught for 11 years in this department. But earlier I taught in art history for about 18 years. So, well, this is the department where I joined after Subramanian left.
Yes.
And continued my sort of what. You see, I was not trained as an art historian. I was trained as a painter. I'm a painter. So I studied art history in order to teach art history. But actually my heart was in painting.
But then why did they put you in art history?
There was no
vacancy.
No position in painting. So, and the art history position was available. So I joined it and I enjoyed it also. Right. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And so if you were taking a class in painting, would it be in this kind of an environment?
It was very similar. You know, this is the kind of class we had. The students gather and they have an object they draw. They do sort of drawing, then they do watercolor. Here I think they are doing a workshop, if I am not mistaken. So they are all used. Yeah, क्या बना रहे हैं आप लोग? This is yours? और ये कटआउट सब बनाए हैं? You have?
So it was a free exercise.
Okay.
I mean, we have to work with non-conventional material and rather than paint brushes, pencils, and think out of the box. So those are the exercises what we have to do.
Fun?
Yeah, so much fun.
Much more enjoyable than just sitting and painting, no? It's a lot of fun. That's good. Yeah, glad to see that the studio is transformed into a workshop.
Oh, why? Well, earlier it was not?
No, it was always. There was always workshop. I joined here. When I joined painting, I called Bhupen Khakkar, my friend. And Bhupen Khakkar conducted a workshop. That was within a month or two. So we all started doing something different than what is normally done in the classroom.
Okay. So every time there was a project, you would give a concept, or how did it work?
Well, sometimes there is a concept. Sometimes you have something which emerges out of teaching. You know, if you want to do something, let's say, about animals, then you have Kamati bag right in front of you, and you go and perhaps work, in some way find out ways of dealing with that. Or even you go outside the studio and work on the ground. Mm-hmm. So there are all kinds of things they do. They also sit and work here, but at the same time they also do such workshops.
If I talk about Gulam sir's work, I wouldn't talk about any specific work or painting, but the generation that he belongs to, it is something very appreciable. Still chosen to paint, irrespective of hell lot of new mediums. But it is that those group of artists which choose to paint from that point of time, and they have still continued doing that.
one of the, I think, most important contribution by him to him is that, you see, if you look at, many art schools in this country, you would realize that, they all, follow certain kind of, formalistic, exercises. Whereas I think, Baroda from the beginning, has been, very much rooted in, certain kind of, humanist, ethos. And I think, at the time when Gulam, Sheikh was the, head of the department, he really, took it to a level where, we realized that, we are not really working in any kind of, isolation. And it is important, for us to, look at the society and make attempts to connect, with them. I think this is one of the central issues which came about, I think, during his teaching years, which has had long lasting impact on many of us who are practicing as artists and teaching in this faculty, in this department now.
I was a student of Sheikh Bhai between 1987 and 89. Those are the 2 years when I did my masters in Baroda after finishing my graduation from Shantiniketan. I remember very distinctly was the theory classes that he would conduct. They were called History of Painting, but they basically covered a whole plethora of things. It's not just about the history of painting. He talked about history in general, about the social economic impact and how art is interconnected with society. It was not happening in isolation. It's usually art history is taught as if, art history is happening in isolation from everything else, but that is not the case with Sheikh Bhai's class, and that is the most important lesson perhaps that I learned. One thing that opened my eyes was one trip we made to Ajanta. We were being taught Ajanta paintings, and then Sheikh Bhai suddenly decided that let's go to Ajanta, and he was that kind of, he would infuse that enthusiasm in you. So we made an impromptu trip to Ajanta. And then I remember we entered cave number 17 and he was talking about, imagine the days when these were painted, these caves would be pitch dark. And people would actually see these narratives with a lamp in hand. And you move from one section of the narrative to the other section of the narrative. So it's kind of pre-cinematic cinema, that is how these narratives will be read. And you suddenly go back 2000 years and you imagine yourself in that position, and it's those spotlights vanish, those other people, the guides vanish, other tourists vanish, and it's just you and that work. And it was such a revelation, and it impacted me so hugely that even now when I talk to my students about Ajanta, or I visited Ajanta 7 times subsequent to that visit, and every time I recall that, and it gives me goosebumps when I imagine that situation. So it's been great, and I'm so glad that I made that decision to come here and study under him. It actually changed the way, the direction of my work, my life.